Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. We've got a great program for you. I'm Eddie Alterman, Chief Brand Officer of Hearst Autos, which includes Car and Driver, of course, Road and Track, Auto Week, and now Bring a Trailer. I'm going to be talking to the founder of Bring a Trailer, which has just become a cultural phenomenon, and the guys behind it are incredible and super knowledgeable about the collectible business, and it's, I think, going to be fascinating. We encourage you to put your questions in the chat too, and we'll try to get those answered. And definitely stick around if you're a Track Club member afterward to talk to Randy some more, and the link is in your bio. So Randy, welcome. Thanks for talking to us today from San Francisco. And that's really my first question for you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about the origin story here, and Bring a Trailer really grew out of the San Francisco car culture. And how would you characterize that culture, you know, as distinct from LA or the New York area, Midwest?
Yeah, it's an interesting one out here. So there's a few different sort of microcosms out here, right? There's the city proper. I lived in San Francisco for 18 years in the city. And a lot of people think, oh, you know, it's maybe the Transamerica Pyramid or people who live in high rises or whatever. But the vast majority of the city is somewhat hilly topography with, you know, 2-story or maybe a 3-story home with a tight garage underneath it. So this isn't a city where you have, you know, Lamborghinis driving around because you can't get over a sidewalk, right? And it's not a city where you, see a lot of supercars or see, you know, stuff you may associate with like LA and that sort of scene. A giant muscle car doesn't even fit in a garage here. So there's a really strong moto scene here based on just the garage space. And there's like the photo that's up right now. That's a photo I took of the sort of circle of friends that I fell in with here in San Francisco of automotive, super passionate automotive folks that are into sports cars, classics, interesting one-off type stuff. It seems like people in SF like to have stuff that's different than everybody else, right? So they get into sort of weird variants of cars. And there's something that most people outside of SF may not know is there's a very strong sort of driving and rallyist sort of culture here. There's a ton of windy roads in every direction out of the city. And so there are these events, 1-2 day events where you go on and you drive all these roads, be it out to the Pacific coast, be it to Lake Tahoe and mountains, wine country, all these different things that are within sort of shooting distance. And San Francisco also has 2 world-class racetracks that are, you know, not very far, you know, Laguna Seca to the south and Sears Point, what I still call Sears Point, you know, Sonoma Raceway to the north. So there's just a lot of variety. It's a very diverse city, right? So it's not just, you know, the rich finance folks that are driving, you know, Porsches and fancy cars. It's kind of, there's a lot of, you know, different price ranges. A lot of people driving MGBs, a lot of people driving vintage and more sort of 80s, 90s era BMWs, cool stuff. So anyway, if I had to describe it in a couple of words, I'd say it's very diverse and it's always just sort of interesting in a way that that I think people may not expect in an urban environment to be into cars.
And it seems like, you know, the site has what you Northern Californian types call terroir. There is a sort of bias toward those sorts of cars, right? What was your original vision for the site?
Yeah, well, I mean, variety. I mean, I grew up in the Bay Area, so I can't claim to grow up in San Francisco, but I grew up in the SF Bay Area, right? And it's all over the map, but it has a little bit more more flexibility around, you know, topography and demographic and different sorts of cars you'd see, right? Like Good Guys. The Good Guys shows are based here in the city, right? Super muscle car, deep with muscle cars. A lot of hot rod shops, a lot of off-roading opportunities. The Rubicon's a couple, you know, hours away, and buddies of mine and I would do that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think the variety is what makes BAT really cool, and that's why it can reach a broad audience. But we discovered super early that, even the guys that are, in the PCA and really into 911s, if, they happen to grow up right in the back of a Mercedes station wagon, right? So you feature one of those cars and all of a sudden those guys get all frothed up and excited, right? And somebody that likes newer cars may have had some family connection to older cars, or somebody who restores cars professionally, they have, some weird connection or desire for, trucks or, something you wouldn't expect. So the variety on BAT is really what makes it cool. And that stemmed from the kind of car shows and the kind of events that I like to go to as a kid. I never liked going to like a Ferrari show. That wouldn't really do anything for me. I love Ferraris, but like single mark was never my deal. I've always liked, a Volkswagen parked next to a Renault, parked next to a Toyota. And, it's like walking through the paddock at a racetrack instead of going to sort of a car dealership where there's, 12 F-150s lined up in a row. So variety has always been key for sure.
Definitely has that spirit. And, I've been following it forever since it was a listing site of great auction offerings around the web. How did you go from listing cars to actually auctioning them?
Good question. So we turned it on, way back in 2007. And it was just me talking to nobody. I like to joke that the microphone was off. It was almost my, it was good for my health to be able to talk about this stuff sort of and type about it and play around online. And then an audience showed up a few months or maybe years later, right, to start to get enthusiastic about it through just sort of feeding it off to other folks. But then it wasn't until probably 2009, a couple years after we had started, that people started to say, hey, there's an audience here, and I really wish you would pick up my car on Craigslist or eBay, but you probably won't. So what if I just email it to you, and can you list my car, right? So the light bulb kind of went off and said, oh, this is interesting. Like, people would like to list their car in a different way once they saw the vibrancy of the community, right? The vibrancy of discussion and an intelligent discussion going on around cars online, which hadn't really happened online in a meaningful way. There were forums, but those are kind of cumbersome to navigate your way through and sometimes hard to approach. But for whatever reason, this format of a sort of blog comment format plus cool, interesting vehicles that are for sale right now, that really, sparked it. And then once they started fighting over cars, we knew, you got to let them bid. Otherwise, they're all just going to argue about price all day.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about next. The most powerful thing about this and why it's become such a force of nature, I think, is because of the power of the commenters and how knowledgeable they are. And also, I think the high level of discourse and the class with which people approach each other and treat each other with real respect. How do you keep that intact? How do you moderate that? How do you keep that growing?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's something we consider ourselves very fortunate to have fostered over the years. I mean, BAT has been around. Some people think it's like sort of overnight success, right? But it's been around for 13, coming up on 14 years, which is crazy. And it was like this, slow flywheel of this locomotive getting more and more commenters and more interesting folks. And yeah, just setting the ground rules of, respect and rewarding people that offered, good, sage advice, but also do it in a kind and thoughtful way. The internet was really, to some degree still is, sort of void of that. It's really hard to find that online. And so we've been, very active in our way that we encourage that as much as we can online with some rule making, but also, you give a high five to somebody when they do something really great. You want to keep those kind of people around, right? If Eddie Alterman's in there talking about the 911 that he drove this morning, I mean, that's viable, right? But if somebody's in there saying, oh, I don't like 911s, and it's like he's never seen one in his life, right? These are different levels, right? You got to kind of figure out how you foster genuine enthusiasm and expertise in a way that is welcoming to everybody. Everybody gets a shot, and it's not exclusive. You don't want to make it exclusive, but at the same time, you want to maintain that sort of quality. So yeah, the BAT community is really what sets us apart and our site apart, the vibrancy of that. There's all sorts of other people that would love to just turn on an internet auction, but there's kind of nobody there. It's kind of crickets, or it's a kind of a bogus discussion going on. And it's really great to have the vibrancy of the BAT community and that be a massive differentiator.
Yeah, you have that great network effect. And for 13, 14 years, it's incredible. And what have you seen change about the collectible market in that time? What are the trends that you've identified?
Well, I mean, big picture, almost even outside of cars, I mean, people are becoming much more tech savvy, much more comfortable with technology, with doing things on their phones, obviously, right? I mean, think about what iPhone people had in their pocket in 07 or whatever, or what devices they were using, or how much they had transacted on Amazon Prime way back when, right? I mean, the world has come a long way in terms of digital adoption. So I think that's a major component that has evolved. In just the car universe, I think there is so much more data and knowledge online, and we're trying to contribute positively to that. But I think people are really well informed. Like if you need to figure out, not even like repair or restoration, but like what a car's worth or what they're transacting for or what's going on, there are places online, BAT being one of them, where you can go very quickly figure stuff out that 15 years ago, 14 years ago would have been like, oh my goodness, like where do I, you probably go to a little, paper guide of some sort, or you go to, magazine archives that you've had on your shelf for a million years and like go back there. I think the online, data online as a resource has really come so far in this amount of time, and that impacts how people buy and sell and how they want to do that process.
Yeah, no question. And more recently, how's COVID, I'm sorry, I'm trying to forget the word, COVID impacted the market? It seems sort of counterintuitive. I see your results and I look at how incredibly successful it's been and how the guy keeps climbing the Matterhorn there. You would think that wouldn't be happening, but can you talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
the dynamics there?
Yeah, absolutely. So COVID, first of all, I mean, groundwork on that is I don't think anybody could have ever known. If anybody says now, like, oh, I knew this was going to happen, totally crazy. No, it's been such an uncharted journey the last 6 or 9 months or since March. And we certainly have been very fortunate that, again, this digital adoption sort of thing that was already happening, like online auctions aren't successful because of COVID, but we were ramping up for, a number of years of auctions. And then all of a sudden COVID was this like giant wind at our backs. And it also shut down all the competition, right? If you wanted to go, like car dealers all panicked for a period of time there after March. And certainly tent auctions where you're going to go like sit with like 200 random people, in a tent somewhere on a shared folding chair, that became very sketchy, right? So there was just sort of some things that happened instantaneously. But then what's interesting to me is the sort of buyer behavior. Like people decided they really wanted to dig in and invest in their hobbies, right? This isn't just cars. This is like, if you're into gardening or you're into fixing up your house or you're into, whatever hobby that you have, I think people really latched onto those as sort of their comfort, solace in this crazy time of turbulence. So for car people, for me, for you, for a lot of people, we're like, double down, like go in the garage, like go for a drive. You can do that in an isolated way. You can, the dynamics of COVID were actually, other than social car gatherings, and again, these big events and tents and that sort of thing were super positive. And we couldn't have guessed that. A lot of that is, great, good fortune for us and online communities and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, you can see it certainly in our results. I mean, BAT has absolutely boomed in terms of users, bidders, cool cars being offered, bid prices for sure, right? People have, money to spend and they're not spending it on, taking the family on a trip at the holidays. They're kind of like hunkered down. So one thing they can do is look at cool cars on BAT and then end up bidding on them. And we have seen that in really amazing ways in the last 6 months.
And the kind of cars are changing a little bit, more bug out mobiles. I mean, we've got this.
Some of them.
Yeah.
I mean, we list crazy stuff on BAT, as you know. And I think, there's a slide up, you take a look at like results of trucks. Well, the first thing people want to know is like, okay, so does the market crater, or does it stay stable, or does it go gangbusters? And it's somewhere between it staying stable and going gangbusters, right? It obviously didn't crater. So, but the types of vehicles I think are very interesting. Like where my mind went when I was like stuck in my house and like was not allowed to leave and nobody's allowed to see their best friend. It went to sort of escape fantasy, right? And for me, that's not like, weirdo, go sit by yourself in the desert somewhere. That's more like adventure. Like, man, I want to go like climb a mountain. I want to go to the mountains again. Can I please do that, right? And I want to go, to some remote location. And can I do that and I'm a sort of truck guy, so I follow the truck market pretty closely. Which again had some momentum, certainly momentum and stories written about it before COVID, but I think COVID again pushed that way forward. Broncos, Scouts, you saw that Toyota slide, the highest results for Toyota pickup trucks we've had are since COVID, with some really wild like outlier type results on great examples of those vehicles. So I think that COVID has been, across the board, caused more people to bid and chase down great cars that they really wanted. I think there's a little bit of mortality too, frankly, right? Like people are like, I've always wanted a certain type of car. Am I going to wait? Like maybe I need to like make some things happen now. The future is sort of uncertain, and you never know how we're all going to come back to work and normal life and whatever. So I think it pulled some people's decision making to the here and now a little bit more than, maybe in 20 years I'll do that.
That's fascinating. That's a great insight. Okay, before we take some questions from viewers, we're going to go to the lightning round here. We're going to do some top threes.
Randy. Cool.
So what are your 3 favorite cars of all time? I know you talked about trucks and San Francisco and all that. So how does that all come together for you?
Oh, well, that's a big question for anybody. I mean, mainly because you have to rule out so many good ones, right? If you only get to pick 3, ideal, 3 cars for me. I mean, I'm also German, right? Nonnenberg's a long German last name, so I'm a Porsche guy. I, as a kid, had the most models of Porsche 959s as a kid, so I'm 959 guy. Even though those are so crazy expensive, I still think they're wonderful. And then, FJ40. You see FJ40 over my shoulder over here. That's a car I've had for a long time. I will never sell that thing, and I love those. It was my first car. I got to drive those to high school, so there's a ton of nostalgia there for me in those. And then I'd say 60s Fords. I love sort of everything that happened around 63, 64, 65 with Ford, right? I love Mustang Fastbacks. I love Cortinas. I love Galaxies, running NASCAR. So anything, Falcons, that sort of whole genre of Ford. So I think that gives me 3. That gives me a German, a Japanese, a 80s. That's not a bad coverage for top.
You got your Hank the Deuce cars in there. That's good. You got your Piek. There you go. That's good stuff. So what were the 3 most surprising results on BAT? The biggest results that kind of blew you away?
I mean, we have had some really wonderful examples of sort of best of breed, for lack of a better term. And when we have those, either through almost no miles on a car, like it would have been in the showroom, or we have just spectacular condition. Like we sold a 240Z for, I think it was 311,000. I mean, just absurd. I would never pay 311,000 for probably any Z car, but that was just crazy. That was a special one. There were 2 guys that really wanted to go after it, and they went absolutely bananas after this early 240Z. So, I mean, that sort of thing is crazy. And then I don't know if you saw just last week. Did you see the Aston DB5 1-to-1 scale model? It was like a dealership model that was electric. Did you see that? I think Road and Track wrote it up actually. Anyway, super interesting. I know those cars are 800 to $1 million now, the real ones, but that thing got 200 grand for the scale model version. I was just kind of like, whoa, that's crazy. So yeah, those are a couple good ones. And, you know, I mean, these low mile trucks, we've had a couple actually, Chevy Silverados, where not super special truck, in my opinion, right? You know, mid 80s square body type, Chevy, but no miles, almost like a farm truck that wasn't used or something. And they bid up to the, you know, 60, 70, 80 grand sort of numbers, which makes no mathematical sense in my mind. So it's clearly an emotional buy.
What about that Civic SI, right? Remember that Civic SI?
Civic SI, yeah, but that one I think was more reasonable, man. I mean, what was it? What did it end up? 50 grand, something like that? I forget what that one went for. But anyway, those cars, I mean, that's one you're really going to get out there and use and hang on to it. You probably missed out on having one as a high schooler, so now you want one. We see, you know, nostalgia drive bidding all the time on BAT, but the ones that really, really go bananas in the bidding are either low or no miles, or just something, you know, you're not going to see another one of these for like years, right? You got to bid now. And so those really go crazy.
So what about the top results? I see we got the Going up here. That's a 56. That thing went crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, top three cars that we've ever sold on BAT. I think we have a couple pictures of them. There's the top two are Gull Wings, the gray one, and then another Gull Wing sold more recently here in the last couple months for 7 figures, you know, over $1 million on the internet, right? And then the third one is a Mura, which was a really like highlighter electric colored Mura. And yeah, these are cool. We get that question a lot. I like that you asked that question. A lot of people are always like, yeah, so what's the craziest, you know, most expensive on BAT? And the big story there is all three of those cars are, you know, impressive and amazing milestone cars. But people thought that you couldn't transact this sort of stuff online, right? You needed to go to either a dealer or famous old auction house or something like that. And the cool part about, I think, what we've done, this was pre-COVID and even before, is proven that you can sell that sort of thing online and transact it online, and do it with crazy, right? The one thing about the car business that has always bugged me is like big fees on transactions. Like each of those cars, those are $1 million cars, each of them, right? 1.2 for the gray car, I think in the 1.1s for the other Gull Wing, and then just under $1 million for the Mura, which is where those cars ought to be. That's kind of what they transact at. But usually when you buy that somewhere else, you know, 20%, 10% coming and going at least gets squeezed out of the deal by whoever's brokering it or the auction house. And that's like 200 grand on each of those cars. You could, you know, buy a GT3 Porsche for the price of the fees you lose, right? And that's another reason we started BAT, frankly, is the internet is very efficient, right? I mean, we cap our fees at $5,000. That Gull Wing had a $5,000 fee, which might be the smallest fee ever charged on a Gull Wing. I would love to have that be a claim to fame. So that's another reason for people flocking to online, and the continual adoption of transacting things online is how efficient it is from a fee perspective.
And so I know we're kind of not supposed to talk about investment and money. We're supposed to talk about love of the game and all that, but you can't avoid it. I'm sure you, like me, get asked all the time, what 3 cars would you buy now that have like an upside potential to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get asked that all the time. Whenever anything's transacting, people start to frame it as investment. And particularly those crazy results that we get, people are like, wow, maybe the one I bought for $3,000 is that $300,000 one now. And that usually isn't apples to apples, but it's an interesting conversation to have. But yeah, I mean, I'm terrible at investing in vehicles and making money off of them. I like to say that I like to invest in fun and enjoyment because I tend to take a bath on the cars. So having fun with them lets me justify this whole. So And I think you can combo those in a really interesting way. And so I put up the first thing that jumped to mind was Z cars. And this kind of applies to Datsun 510s too. But this early Japanese genre of sports cars, people love them and go crazy for them on BAT. Rightfully so. Datsun Roadsters, I don't want to leave those out of the conversation. But what I wanted to say about it, right? I mean, you can go spend hundreds of thousands, 6 digits on like the best ones in the world. And try to just sit on them and, you know, rub them with a diaper until hopefully they're worth even more down the road. But this car, the one you're looking at right there, looks, you know, substantially similar, even in condition, to some of the really high dollar ones. And that car sold for 25 grand, right? So I'm a believer in, you can buy that car, an iconic model at a sort of appropriate price, drive it for 3, 4, 5 years. Put a little bit of money into it, you know, freshen it up or correct some wrongs that were done to it, whatever. Get that enjoyment factor and then sell it again on BAT in 3 years or whatever, and probably be like quasi break even from the finances. Or if you really time it right, or you really bought it low, or you did something, you could potentially make money on it from an investment perspective. And you get the fun and the investment part of it. So I think that car in particular, that exact one you're showing, but also that model, those Datsun models, I think are super, super smart. And I mean, full disclosure, we have the BAT, the company owns a 240Z because they're awesome, but also I'm not trying to hype that market. If you want to hype the 510 and the Roadster, you can do that. But I just think that they're just solid, you know, super fun to drive, and they're not going to get any cheaper. 240Zs are not going to become $5,000 cars again. It's just not going to happen. There's too much cash out there circulating. So that's a great one. That's number one. And then, yeah, I sent you a picture of this cool Porsche 914 in the same vein. I think 914s have become super respectable. I think maybe 20 years ago, they were kind of more considered Volkswagen-ish. But now, I mean, Porsche across the board, as you know, probably better than any other brand, has invested in their heritage and their vintage models, and there's awesome gatherings and excitement around things like Luftgekühlt, and Porsche has these tracks where you can go to, you know, they have enthusiast days and different sorts of things. They've just done an awesome job. And the 914 is right in there in legitimacy, right? I mean, you can show up in a 4-cylinder 914 and cruise and have a clean one like this. So this sold for 25 grand, again, same as that Z. And the good ones, the really good ones are trading for well more than that. And yeah, you can find a junk 914 out there that's rusted out, and, you know, the engine smokes like crazy for you know, 6 or 8 grand, probably kind of like you always could. But these sort of cars in the mid-teens to mid-20s, you get a really special one of these. And again, I don't think those cars are going to, you know, the bottom's going to fall out and they're going to go back to zero again. I think you can have a lot of fun, and I think the price will creep up. You're not going to get rich and buy a mansion off of your 914 purchase, but you're going to have a great time with it, and it's kind of money in the bank.
Yeah. And a third one.
Would you agree, or do you think I'm crazy, Eddie?
No, I love 914s. I think they're awesome. And mid-engine Porsches, I'm a fan all the way around.
Cool. Yeah, even if it's got a VW bus engine in it. But I mean, the 6-cylinder ones are great too. But anyway, we sell a lot of interesting ones. But the third one, you asked for 3. The third one, I wanted to talk about something a little bit more modern. So this car is live on the site right now. And I love the 2-door 2.5 RS Subaru, just as in concept, right? I mean, it was kind of right in the McRae era, and it was 2-door instead of the 4-door. You couldn't get the big turbo engines that they sold in other countries, but it just had the look. And then this one's modified in the right way, and it's like, I think this one is like the best one that has been offered in a good while, based on a US spec car. So I think those, like, we find really sort of survivor low mile cars like those. So many, as everyone knows, have been you know, hacked up or rallied or modified, or, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff has been done to them. So this is another model where finding a really good one it's money in the bank. You buy a great one, maybe it has 50,000, 60,000 miles on it. If you can find one of those, you can add another 20,000 miles over the next 3, 4, 5 years and then sell it. And it's going to be worth more at that point, just because there's just not very many good ones out there. So that's part of the curation on BAT, is we try to feature the good ones that you don't see every day. And this is a huge standout. This one will get really strong bidding, and the blue color you can't argue with. That's my favorite. But but just that model in this goes for early WRXs too, right? The 4-door bug-eye WRX, and then the STIs that followed, like low mile versions of those. If you search them on BAT, they get great results, and people are always going to like those.
Yeah, and that car really typifies the 2000s to me, and has such a great, homologation story and boxer engine again.
Yep.
So let's take a couple from the crowd that came in. Okay. So Chris from Stamford, Connecticut, he says, I want to list my 1984 Saab. Can you give me some pointers for a best sale?
Okay, yeah. So we take that sort of advice with everybody that walks in the door, or give that sort of advice. Love listing Saabs. A lot of Saabs on BAT, and that makes me happy. But yeah, I mean, pointers for listings, obviously online, anywhere, but certainly on BAT is great photography, right? People buy it and get fired up. That blue Subaru you just saw is having such a great result, because that first shot, you're like, wow, I want it. So the olden days of, eBay and Craigslist, and like a shadowy photo with your finger over the license plate and all this sketchy, funny stuff that used to happen. Photos are super key. And there's a lot of people that walk into BAT and they don't realize, they're like, I don't know how to do that. What should I do? Should I use my iPhone? And we actually offer pro photos, for a couple $100, which is, your bidding will far surpass a couple $100 higher if you invest in that. We have found. So anyway, so we offer that, but we love it when people are resourceful and do it themselves and take a great set of photos with good light and really showcase the vehicle. So photos are key. Honestly, with a Saab, let's be honest, people are going to want to see, maintenance and see that the thing works well, and it's not going to be a mechanical nightmare from moment one. So for a Saab, I would say good documentation of recent service. We really like to display paperwork and documentation of what is done. That reflects well on the seller and really increases bidder confidence. And then the third one, I'd just say, like, clean it up, have it clean, right? Some people submit us cars and there's like papers in the footwells, and it's kind of like obvious that it like sat outside last night or whatever. And you're just kind of like, come on, man. I mean, it doesn't have to be like armor all like glare coming off the thing, but tidy it up, put it in a nice location for the photos that doesn't have, garbage cans all behind it and that sort of stuff. It doesn't have the hose like laying out in front of it that shows you just washed it, just like put some thoughtfulness into it. And I mean, we see everything under the sun, Eddie, and so we love giving advice of do these few things and it will go well.
Okay. So another question. Phil from Albuquerque, New Mexico, wonders, were there other names you considered before going with Bring a Trailer?
So this is a funny one. So 07, we turned it on in January 07. And I say we all the time. I started it with my buddy from college. Could not have started it without him. I'm the co-founder. I'm not the founder. But he and I, on an email chain, we're going back and forth. We're like, what do we call it? We got to pick a URL. What do we call it? And so, I mean, all sorts of like dumb ideas, like car themed sort of cheese ball ideas thrown around. Do we talk about marketplace? Do we talk about nostalgia? Do we talk, all these words? And we kind of hit a dead end, and then kind of circled back on this thread over the course of probably 4 or 5 days. And there were some other names, but I mean, none of them were good. But Bring a Trailer, people always ask Bring a Trailer. And there's a lot of people that harken back to, old Bring a Trailer was a bunch of junk cars on trailers and stuff like that. And actually that was never what it was about. The Bring a Trailer name I liked because I read classified ads as a kid in the San Jose Mercury News, instead of, my homework or whatever, right? I mean, that's all I wanted to read was classified ads for cars I was never going to buy. And, you know, someone would say, oh, this is stashed in my garage, doesn't run. And right there in the ad, it would say, bring a trailer. I used to search bring a trailer on nationwide Craigslist searches because people would write it in their ad. It wasn't a website. It was like a term. And for me, you bring a trailer for a piece of junk, but you also bring a trailer for like a Concours perfect Ferrari GTO, right? You're not going to drive that to Monterey. You're going to trailer it to Monterey. So it applies to everything, and it kind of works with both the classified sales component and also everything from cheap to super expensive, and race cars, which I always thought was cool. But yeah, there's no real ringers. Like we didn't almost call it, you know, bring us something else, or you know, any other thing that resonated. Once we hit bring a trailer, we're like, sweet, that's it.
Well, I think it's a great name, and it's evocative, and it brings you back, like you said, to those classifieds at the back of Auto Week and Road and Track. And I think that's a really great way to wrap this up. This has just been fantastic. And, you know, talking to you, Randy, you see why you've had so much success, because you're so thoughtful and so smart about this business, and I think so responsive and in tune with your audience. So thanks for doing what you do. We're going to head over. The track members are going to track club members are going to head over to the Zoom room. There's a link in their email, and I'm just going to read a little PSA. So as a reminder to our viewers today, thank you very much. Head over to roadandtrack.com/join to learn more and become a member of the Track Club, where you can get all access to print and digital content for the reimagined Road and Track, dozens of partner privileges, and first dibs on insider events like this one. Again, that's roadandtrack.com/join. And we also just launched the Road and Track shop at shop.roadandtrack.com, where you can grab branded gear and cool stuff. And all right, thank you again, Randy. This has been great. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. Thank you for watching.
Thanks so much.